27 ASEAN Summit.
Live events, analysis and perspectives.
We will really be seeing vaccines soon.
Imports, which were expected to grow slightly, contracted 2.1%.
News that matters. Asia Now, daily. On CNA.
Singapore has been shaped over hundreds of years by a blurring of cultural and ethnic boundaries.
Singapore's success was based on its perfect geographical location.
Singapore, a city with a surprising wild side.
Our tiny island is really alive day and night.
Our commitment to improve bilateral ties on the basis of equality and mutual respect.
Imagine the Singapore you know, only reimagine it.
Singapore has a role to play in the AI world.
When you get AR and VR spaces, there's the opportunity to bring children and parents together to play.
Singapore gears up to develop this new frontier.
The sky is the limit.
印太战略的真正的目的是企图搞印太版的北约。
We know that Beijing continues to coerce, to intimidate.
Money for health and education!
核潜艇合作构成严重核扩散风险。No U.S. president will send any soldier to fight for Taiwan.
If you ask me, is our relationship normal today? My answer to you is no, it is not.
I think that this is a new world disorder.
Watch out. There is definitely a danger of war.
Welcome back. Updating this hour's top stories. Investigators probing the crash of a China Eastern Airlines jet in March say data points to it being a deliberate act. The World Health Organization warns new variants could emerge in North Korea, given the high levels of transmission among unvaccinated people. Plus, alarming insights into the effects of pollution. A new study shows it caused 9 million premature deaths globally in 2019. Sweden and Finland are set to formally submit their requests to join NATO today. The move marks a sharp departure from their decades-long policy of a neutral military posture. But first, they've got to get past NATO member Turkey's objections. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has insisted he will not say yes to their membership bid. But both countries are confident they will be able to sway Turkey. The Finnish president says he's optimistic their differences can be resolved. Turkey is objecting to the membership because of Sweden and Finland's alleged support for Kurdish militants, which Ankara sees as terrorists.
Jag hade ett telefonsamtal med president Erdogan I början av april. Och det var hemskt klart att han stöder. Han sa det att det ska assess favorable finska medlemskap. Nu det ser ut att det finns lite olika opinioner. Man måste diskutera vidare.
Now, the US says there is a strong consensus among members to welcome both countries to NATO. To show support, President Joe Biden will host the leaders of Finland and Sweden to talks at the White House tomorrow.
I know there's a perception that it may be a foregone conclusion, but precedent, protocol, procedure, all those P words are very important, especially in the world of diplomacy.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine prompted Finland and Sweden to seek NATO membership. Moscow says it has no issues with NATO's expansion, but it is warning the security alliance against bolstering its military presence in the two Nordic states. Simon Marks tells us the significance of tomorrow's meeting between President Biden and his Finnish and Swedish counterparts.
Well, it's going to be a big moment, there's no question about that. A big moment for the president, and it's clearly designed to send a message not just to America's partners in NATO, but more importantly to the Kremlin. A fresh indication, the White House argues, of just how much Vladimir Putin has already lost by choosing to invade Ukraine, because neither Finland nor Sweden were close to thinking about applying for NATO membership before the Russian assault began. In fact, they jealously guarded their efforts to avoid doing anything that would antagonize Moscow. But all of that is over now, provided, of course, the US can secure the unanimous support of every NATO country to expand the alliance. That's what's required to expand it. And there are still questions about Turkey. The Secretary of State met his Turkish opposite number on Tuesday, said he believed that consensus can be found within NATO for welcoming two new members, but there are no guarantees about that yet. And there's going to be a lot of work behind the scenes to try and ensure that Ankara, nor indeed any other member of NATO, seeks to delay this in any way or derail it.
On the ground, the battle at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol appears to have reached an end after a siege lasting more than 80 days. More than 260 Ukrainian fighters defending the facility have surrendered to Russian forces. Buses were seen escorting the soldiers out, some of them seriously wounded and evacuated on stretchers. All have been transferred to Russian-held towns. Ukraine has hailed their courage and tenacity for holding out for so long, describing them as heroes who changed the course of war. But the fate of Mariupol's defenders remain unclear. Kyiv expects a prisoner exchange, but Russia's lower house of parliament has objected, calling the Ukrainian fighters Nazi criminals that should not be swapped. Some Moscow officials have suggested that Ukrainian fighters detained could be tried or executed. All of this comes as the U.S. State Department launches a new program to capture and analyze evidence of war crimes allegedly committed by Russian forces in Ukraine. The International Criminal Court has also sent a 42-member team to Kyiv to investigate this, its largest deployment in its history. Rosie Burchard tells us what this says about the extent of possible war crimes in Ukraine.
Well, it says that they're a scale at which they want to investigate a great deal. In fact, we see this 42 investigators being sent from the Office of the International Criminal Court's Chief Prosecutor, Karim Khan. They will be collecting testimonials linked to military attacks which could constitute war crimes. They'll also be mapping existing action by crime scene investigators of Ukraine. It's all really about collecting hard evidence. An International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan says that now more than ever, people need to see the law in action. So the cogs of international criminal justice are turning, but they move at a very slow pace. Just to give you an example, last month a trial opened at the ICC over alleged war crimes in Darfur, but that was 20 years after that Sudanese region became embroiled in violence. So in order even for Russians accused of perpetrating war crimes to be brought to the International Criminal Court, they would essentially have to be handed over, and it's hard to see a situation at the moment in which that could happen. Russia, of course, denies that its forces have perpetrated and been responsible for atrocities. Right now, this team of investigators, it's all about collecting evidence for a moment at some point in the future at which a prosecution may be possible, but international criminal justice does not move at a speedy pace.
Eugene Chasovsky, senior analyst and program head at New Lines Institute, tells us how the siege at the Azovstal steel plant hindered Russia's operation in Ukraine.
I think to a certain extent it was largely symbolic. Obviously, it was very heroic for those Ukrainian military members to hold out for as long as they did. But essentially, the Russian land bridge from eastern Ukraine to Crimea was all but set in stone at this stage. It did certainly distract Russian troops from achieving their broader objective, which is basically to retake all of Donbass. Now perhaps that gives them more leeway, although they faced resistance in other areas as well.
The U.S. president has spoken out against racism in the U.S., rejecting the lie of white supremacists and calling on Americans to join him in doing the same. Mr. Biden was in Buffalo, New York, to meet with families of the victims of a race-related shooting rampage. 10 people were killed and 3 others injured at a supermarket over the weekend. Almost all of the victims were black.
What happened here is simple and straightforward. Terrorism. Terrorism. Domestic terrorism. White supremacy is a poison running through our body politic. And it's been allowed to fester and grow right in front of our eyes. No more. I mean, no more. We need to say as clearly and forcefully as we can that the ideology of white supremacy has no place in America.
The president singled out what he called the replacement theory as one of the root causes of racial violence in America. The replacement theory is a racist ideology that casts minorities and people of color as an existential threat to white people.
I believe anybody who echoes a replacement is to blame, not for this particular crime, but it's for no purpose except profit and or political benefit. And it's wrong. It's just simply wrong.
Well, Simon Marks tells us how pervasive the problem of the so-called replacement theory is in the U.S. and what Washington is doing about it.
Well, there's no question it's a growing problem. I mean, this is something that 10 or 15 years ago was absolutely fringe in the United States. A conspiracy theory you could only find in fringe books and magazines, far-right racist groups espousing it, and more recently in the darkest corners of the internet. But it has become increasingly part of the mainstream conversation. It's been amplified by figures including the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Republican Newt Gingrich, by Fox News primetime anchor Tucker Carlson. And this is not just a white-on-black issue. It's a claim about immigrants from wherever they come from, Latin America, from Asia, from the Indo-Pacific, even the Asian American community already here. Anybody who doesn't look like an established white American is, the conspiracy theorists argue, part of a plan to dilute the political power of white Americans by expanding the electoral base. It said the media, internet companies, politicians must all stop. It said the media, internet companies, politicians must all stop trying to profit from it, but he didn't unveil a single legislative initiative to make that happen, even as he argued that the country's democracy is, as he put it, endangered.